Hey, and welcome back to our next video in our statistical lecture series. In this video, we're going to talk about how to graph bivariate relationships. Once again, if you've been following along with the videos in order, we have several different variable types or several different variable combinations that we can look at for relationships. In this video, we'll talk about how we can graph categorical and categorical relationships. Once again, that's basically turning a cross-tabulation or contingency table into either what is called a clustered bar chart or a stacked bar chart. We'll also look at how we can graph a continuous variable relationship in a scatter plot, and then we'll look at how we can graph time series data with a line graph. So let's jump right into some examples of how we can use those tools. All right, so let's jump in and take a look at how we can utilize a contingency table and then graphically represent some of that information that appears in the contingency table. Once again, keep in mind that our contingency tables are only used for looking at pairs of categorical variables. Those can be any pairs of nominal, ordinal, and dummy. Keep in mind that we don't want to use a contingency table for continuous variables in the same way that we didn't want to use a frequency distribution table for continuous variables because it would create too many cell entries. So here I have the SAT data open for schools in Pennsylvania that we looked at in one of our previous videos. At the end of this data set, there are actually a couple different sort of categorical variables, but I'm going to focus on the region variable, which codes the regions of the state that the school is located in, and then I've got a dummy variable, charter school, which it denotes with a 0 whether or not the school is a charter school or 1 if the school was a charter school. So what we might want to analyze is there a difference by region for having a charter school? So the way we would do that is we would start by going up to Analyze, and from the Analyze menu we're going to go to Descriptive Statistics, and then from there there's an option for the Crosstab. So here when you open up the Crosstab menu, you have your list of variables on the left window, and you can define your variables as the rows and your variables as the columns. So once again, keep in mind that we generally want to put our dependent variable in the rows, and here we might think that our dependent variable is charter school. So we'll put charter in the rows, and we think that the charter school might be influenced by the region of the state that is in the columns. We don't really have to press any other options here at this point to get our crosstab. So I'm just going to hit OK, and SPS will open my output window, and here you can see I've got my crosstab. So we've got our two charter options, 0, 1, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 regions defined in Pennsylvania. Although in the original data file those regions aren't defined, so we have no idea where region 1 is, where region 2 is, and so on. Once again, it's really important that when you're creating a data file that you actually label the variables so users know what those numeric values refer to, particularly for categorical variables. So we can see we have our cross-tabulation of charter schools, how many charter schools don't exist, and how many charter schools do exist in each one of those regions. You can see, as we looked at before, you can sum across the row for the total number of non-charter schools, 1,452. You can total across the one row for the total number of charter schools, 138. You can total down each column to figure out how many schools are in each region, and all of those add up into basically n, which is 1,590. Now, while the crosstab is really useful, sometimes you'll want to represent the cross-tabulation for your audience in graphic form. So there are two main ways to represent a cross-tabulation in graphic form. One is a clustered bar chart, and one is a stacked bar chart. And we can get both in SPSS by going to Graphs. You can use the legacy dialogues or the chart builder. The legacy dialogues were used in older versions of the program. They still exist for those that like them. If you want to use a legacy dialog, you would use the bar chart option, but here let's use chart builder. So chart builder here gives us some options. We want to create a bar chart, and you can see here that your first option is the simple bar chart. This is for creating bar charts for frequency distribution tables. And then you have an option for, as you can see when I hover over, clustered bar chart and stacked bar chart. So let me do clustered bar chart first. I'm going to drag my clustered bar chart over to the preview window, and it asks me three things. It asks me what to define on the x-axis, what to define on the y-axis, and then how to cluster on x for a set color. So for the most part, we're going to leave the y-axis alone, and we're going to use our two variables to define the x-axis and the clusters. Now, there is no right or wrong way to do it. You're going to want to pick whichever option looks best, so I'll do both here now. So let me first put charter on the x-axis and region as the cluster. Well, don't need to change any options here. I'll hit OK. And we get this graph down here. So you can see here that the x-axis defined 0, 1, whether or not you had a charter school, and the different colored bars for each cluster, right? If we have a cluster of bars for the 0 value of charter, and a clustered set of bars for the charter value of 1, are each color-coded to each of the regions that we're talking about here. So even it's the same information displayed in the CrossTab, but here you get a little visualization that maybe the number of charter schools in the other regions is not so proportional to the number of schools that they have. So there may be fewer charter schools relative to the total number in, let's say, region 1, as there is compared to, say, let's say, region 8. You can also flip the way you define the axes and the clusters in your clustered bar chart. So let's go back to Graph and Chart Builder. And here, instead of having region be the cluster and charter be the x-axis, I'm going to flip region to the x-axis and charter to the cluster. Once again, it's the same information we just displayed in the previous clustered bar chart, although now here you can see that we've got our region defining the x-axis 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then we have a blue bar and a green bar representing our clusters for charter. So here for 1, we've got a blue bar for non-charter schools and a green bar for charter schools, and so on and so forth. Once again, it's just a matter of what type of information you're trying to convey, what type of information you want the reader to take away from your graph. Maybe in some cases it makes more sense to produce the first version of the clustered bar chart, or maybe it makes sense to present the second version of the clustered bar chart, but that would be a decision as a researcher that you would make to help get your point across to your audience. The other option with looking at bar charts for bivariate relationships is to use the stacked bar chart option. And so the stacked bar chart option is the third option under bar. And here, basically, it's the same, almost the same as a clustered bar chart, except instead of clustering the bars next to each other, we're literally going to stack the bars on top of each other. So we'll reproduce the first clustered bar chart where we had charter as the x-axis and region as the cluster, as now stacks. So here you can see that basically what we've done is we've taken our 0, 1 x-axis, and instead of clustering the bars next to each other for the count, we've stacked those bars on top, which helps show us the proportion of schools visually that are in each of those categories. Once again, here you can see that it's very difficult to see the different regions stacked on the charter schools because there's a few of them compared to the non-charter schools. Alternatively, you can create the stacked bar chart, flipping the clusters the other way, where we'll put region on the x-axis and SAT scores in the cluster, or sorry, in the stacks, and that produces this visualization. Now, once again, any of these graphs that I produce, any of these 4 graphs, so going back to the first clustered bar chart, the second clustered bar chart, the first stacked bar chart, or the second stacked bar chart, all of these figures, all these graphs show identical information. There's no information that's conveyed in the stacked bar chart, the second stacked bar chart that's not conveyed in the first clustered bar chart and vice versa. Your role as a researcher is to figure out or decide which of these graphs best conveys the information that you want your audience to take away with. So there really is no right or wrong graph to pick. It's just whichever one is best illustrative of your main points. So basically that's how we can graph visually information from our crosstab or contingency table.